In this video, I'm going to show you how to get perfectly straight cutting lines at your ceiling and trim around your windows, floor, or doors. For this tutorial, you will need some latex caulking, a 4-inch roller frame, some masking tape, some 4-inch paint rollers, a small bucket. I'm using a 2-gallon bucket, I believe, and a paint roller grid designed for a 1-gallon paint can, as well as wall paint and or trim paint. I'm going to go over the two cases where either you don't want to paint your walls and you only want to paint the trim, then you just need the trim paint, or if you want to paint the trim and walls, then you'll need both of these. And good quality paint brushes. I have a nylon polyester blend, which is great for painting the trim as well as doing cut-ins. You can also get away with a Chinex brush, but I would not recommend it because it's too stiff for me. First step, install the roller. If it's a brand new roller, you want to remove any lint from it. Do this. I always just put tape like this. Next step, I get the roller frame, put it in the bucket, and see how high it is above the bottom of the bucket. I want to fill the paint up here, but I don't want to go past this area of the roller because it'll clog it up and become very messy. So I'm going to pour the paint now. That's all I'm going to do because it's reaching the middle of that roller. This is what I'm talking about with the paint getting into the roller. As you can see, it's right at the middle of the roller where it's supposed to rotate. I don't want to get any paint inside this area. Then just get your grid and put it like that so it hangs. I'm going to get my clean paintbrush. Make sure there's no dry flakes of paint in it. For the first case, I'm going to show doing cut-ins at the ceiling area right there. So first thing, position your ladder so you can comfortably reach any areas that you need to. So to do the cut-ins, saturate your paintbrush like this, and don't wipe it off on your bucket like this. You're just wiping all the paint that you just put on it. Get it like this so it's soaked, then just tap it against something like this. Keep rotating it so it doesn't start dripping. Come right here with the small angle leading. I'm going to start just a tiny bit beneath the wall, touch it against the wall. And I'm also holding it like this. I don't want to be holding it way over here. You have much more control right here because you're not having to resist so much force if you're right near where it's touching. So I'm touching the wall like this. I'm going to flatten it out, bend the paintbrush and tilt upwards. And you can see it right here until it gets into the corner up there. Then I'm just going to slowly drag it across. Now you don't want to get too far because you'll run out of paint. You can't see from the floor if it's missing any paint, so don't worry too much about it. And what I do is I typically go about 2 feet doing the same method, so roughly 4 or 5 paintbrush loads. I was able to safely attach my bucket right here so I could hold the camera at a better angle. Thought it was important to add doing the second cut-in after the first brush, just to show you how to transition them. I'm going to start right here in the painted section, and just like before, come up at an angle. It takes some practice to get the feel for what angle to use depending on how stiff your brush is. You can see I missed a little spot there, so I'm going to try to fill it. And got it. When you get to the corners, it's a little more difficult. So what you do, angle the brush like this, stick the high end in the corner, bend and press down at the same time, press it up in there, and then start moving. Same for the other side. Just start your paintbrush like this, touch it against the wall, press it up into the corners, let it glide along the paint, and then start moving. If you have a big bunch like I do right here that's in the way, just press the corners up in there, try to get as best as you can, and start moving along. You can't go any further than this position, but that's how you do the corners. Then it's time to back roll it with your roller. Once you've saturated your roller, roll it along your little grid to get any excess paint off. It tends to drip on the ends, so right here it's fully saturated with paint. So I'm just going to wipe any off that's loose, as well as on this end. Now I'm going to come to the workpiece where I just put the brush on, get as close as possible to the ceiling, and just slightly roll. I'm getting just until the bottom of the ceiling. I don't know if you can see, but as close as possible. You want to eliminate any brush strokes that you cause by the paintbrush. And that's all there is to it. You continue to do a few lengths with just the brush, and then you go back with the roller and back roll it. Here's an example of how it looks after doing cut-ins. You can't tell at all if there's any spot missing paint. Whether you're looking 3 feet away or even within a few inches, you can't tell. If you're painting both the wall and the ceiling, I would strongly recommend doing the ceiling first, then the wall. It's much easier to do it at this angle versus having the wall painted first and trying to do the cut-in using the same process, painting the ceiling afterward. As far as painting the corners between the wall, it's actually very easy. Load up your roller, come to one side, and start rolling down, pressing the end of the roller against the other wall as well at the same time. The little area, make sure I'm pressed up in there so it gets into the corner completely. Now you can see what this creates is a weird texture right here where the smooth side was touching. So what you have to do is flip the roller around like this and back roll it like this, but don't allow the end to touch the wet paint on this side. Now both have an even texture and there's no weird texture created by the end of the roller. Now I'm going to demonstrate what to do if you have painted the trim and then are going to paint the drywall. I'm going to get my masking tape. I'm going to put it roughly 1/8 of an inch away from the drywall. Don't use the trim as a reference. For instance, if there's a big gap right here, do not use the edge of that gap. Always use the drywall as a reference. Then press it flat where it butts up against the trim. Now get your caulking gun and I'm going to run a bead in this little corner right here. If there are big gaps right here, you'll need to fill them up completely. I'm going to wet my finger on my sponge to make sure it's lubricated. Now I'm going to stick my finger right here and just slowly move down, applying very little pressure right now. As you can see, it's a perfectly radiused area right now. Filled in that gap that was there, and it's seamless now between the drywall and the trim. The tape is completely covered at the edge right here. You can see as the caulking feathered out, it completely covered the edge of the tape. Now when you paint over this, paint won't be able to get through at all. As soon as you have taped and caulked the door or trim that you're about to paint, get your paintbrush and roller ready and lightly dab in some paint directly on the wet caulking. You don't want to dig the caulking out, so be careful right here. Get your roller and just roll right next to it. It's best to put a heavy coating, otherwise you might have to do a second coating. I'm making sure the end of the roller here is actually rubbing on the caulking. Now do this all the way around the door or trim that you're painting. After you had painted around the trim, let it set up for just a few minutes. Then as soon as it's starting to set up, peel the tape back off. Pull it up, keeping it ahead of where it's being removed at roughly a 45-degree angle. I'm also pulling outward against the wall. Here's a close-up of pulling it off. I'm going to show you the steps to take if you want to keep the color of the wall and don't plan on repainting it. So first step is to get the masking tape and put it roughly 1/8 of an inch away from the trim directly onto the drywall. Lightly press down at the very end of it. You don't need to press down right here because you're going to be peeling it up anyways. You can see there's roughly 1/8 of an inch gap away from the trim. Next step, get your caulking gun and run a bead in this little gap you created. Then wet your finger and run it along it like this. All you're wanting to do is push the caulking directly underneath the tape to create a nice seal between it and the drywall. So here's a close-up like this. It's just barely overlapping the end of the tape. As soon as you're done applying caulking, when it's still wet, get your paintbrush. When you get to painting the caulking, I load with the paintbrush like this and lightly dab it in here. You don't want to wipe the caulking away and get it on your paintbrush. I'm just dabbing the paint onto it like this. Then, once it's dabbed on there, I'm going to run the paintbrush across it like this to make it smooth. Now, as soon as you're done painting the door trim, when the caulking and paint is still wet, remove the tape like this. As you can see, you have a perfectly straight line where you remove that paint. And that is how to get perfectly straight lines on trim. You could even use this method on a flat surface like this. Here's a round piece of trim butting up against a flat surface. I'm going to put caulking right here and then be able to paint it. Here's that same area after painting it. It's a perfectly straight line. That is how to do cut-ins. If this video was helpful, please like and subscribe.